So if we look here, the first thing that I see is actually, it looks like department stores have the most loyal customers. You can see 66% of customers are VVIP. So this means they're giving 75% of their wallet to one individual department store. This actually could just be because there are fewer options, especially due to closures. If we look at the supermarkets category and also fast food, these actually have the least loyal customers. So between 40 and 50% of customers will actually give up to 25% of their wallet to one individual retailer. And then just to sort of close the loop, so if we look at health and beauty and coffee shops, these are actually the most polarizing. So they have almost equal numbers of customers who are not loyal. So they basically will just go to anyone, and also VVIP. So ones who really have, their favorite health and beauty or coffee shops, and they spend most of their wallet with them.
I look at loyalty as two different things. I look at the transactional and functional loyalty, and I look at emotional loyalty. And I do think they're two different things. And I think that, from a transactional point of view, obviously there are some brands like Tesco, and there's Nectar, and there's various loyalty cards and loyalty programs that give you, as a consumer, something back when you make a commitment, an ongoing commitment to a business. But then there's an entirely different thing, building genuine emotional loyalty with a consumer. Where my mind starts is, rather than what we often do, which is start at the beginning of the funnel, the top of the funnel, and trying to bring people in the door and then work out how we're going to keep them, I go the other way around, and I kind of start at the end and think about customer lifetime value and work back from that, and then try and work out what might it take in order to build that loyalty with someone over time. Every consumer sector has been disrupted because they've all been disintermediated by the internet. And what I mean by that is, if you go back to 1994, prior to the WWW, as consumers, we had limited choice. So whether we were buying cars, whether we were buying food, whether we were buying fashion, or whatever it was, we had, our car showrooms out of town, we had our shopping centres, we had the odd, we had retail parks, we had high streets, and we had some catalogues, and that was it. And of course, the internet changed everything because it drove proliferation of choice for the consumer, and it moved the balance of power from the brand to the customer. And that's the fundamental thing that I don't believe the majority of consumer-facing businesses yet have truly grasped, in terms of what that means to their value proposition and how they go about turning customers into fans.
Department stores where they were seen as a one-stop shop. So you picked your favorite one, you went there, you got all of your shopping, and you didn't need to move around. So certainly people didn't go as often in the statistics that we used to see in the data around those loyalty programs. It was maybe 4 or 5 times a year. They saw that as a loyal customer, but they consistently shopped in that department store, and let's say House of Fraser was their department store of choice, or Debenhams. So they very rarely were you both type of customer. What I do find interesting in the stats is this discounters bit on the supermarkets, because that for me is a lot about convenience. And the supermarket, there used to be a stat around the distance from your house and which supermarket you would go to, and whether people who shop those discounter supermarkets are more concerning in terms of the choice and the price, and therefore they move around a bit more and maybe buy smaller baskets at a time.
We've been working with Pret on their sort of expansion into different markets. And one of the things that they're doing is, as you probably will know, the coffee subscription, where you pay monthly for a subscription to coffee. And that's one of their ways of generating loyalty with their customer base. But I think that's going to be very important as well going forwards as they expand into new markets. They want to take 200 new Prets and they're going to be in territories where they don't have much brand equity. And so building that sort of subscription base and that home delivery model will be key to sort of then making the physical stores work going forwards.
Loyalty is dead, long live loyalty. The way we define loyalty is fundamentally changing. And I described 5 different evolutionary stages of loyalty models, and the days that many of us are still very accustomed to, but where you would have 423 individual loyalty cards in your wallet and you would collect 1 million points and then be able to exchange them for a kettle after 7 years of collecting those points. That is very much generation 1, and that is increasingly out of date. If you move to generation 2, the club card as an example, where you were cross-merchandised, you were sent coupons, and increasingly the organization understood your buying preferences. And if I roll the video forward to the 5th generation, sparing you sort of generation 3 and 4, have a look at China's WeChat commerce, launched a couple of years ago, and it bundles all different categories, B2B, B2C, it bundles fulfillment, it bundles social media, it bundles payment, it bundles various other service propositions alongside product propositions to provide that consumer with a 360-degree holistic approach.
Answer is yes, because if you don't care about loyalty, you're just leaving money on the table. So just to sort of explain the chart, for supermarkets and groceries, for example, a not loyal customer is worth around £400 a year to a retailer. If you can make them loyal, they're around about £500. If they're VIP, they're worth around £1,000. And then VVIP is around £3,000. So if you're actually able to take someone who's not loyal and make them loyal to you, you stand to gain a lot of money. We actually looked at fast fashion retailers, and we looked at them, those that were both online and in store, and then those that were just online only. And we even saw a difference there in how much you could gain. So for retailers that have an online and in-store presence, we found not loyal customers to fast fashion were around £30 a year was their worth, but the VVIPs were worth around £200 per year. So this means that if you could promote someone from being not loyal to VVIP, you stand to gain 7 times as much revenue. When we looked at fast fashion for those who were online only, we saw that there was even more to gain. So not loyal customers would spend around £40 per year with an online fast fashion retailer. Those who are VVIPs was around 400. So there you've got a 10x revenue multiplier if you can make someone not loyal become a VVIP.
It's also about the emotional connections, and that creates advocacy, and that creates behavioural repeats and habits, and that's what we need to think about, the underlying cognitive behaviour that drives somebody to be a VVIP. This is quite a new thing, a subscription or a paid for technique of creating loyalty, where the consumer is actually investing in Amazon Prime or investing in their coffee subscription, and that's making them loyal.
When we speak to retailers, we very often see that marketing and loyalty are still siloed. They are very, very different. And unfortunately, the loyalty or CRM teams tend to be the poor cousin, which much, much less budget. What's interesting about the subscription model is actually it means that the entire business, therefore the business model, has centered around the end consumer. There is no delineation between what is loyalty and marketing. It's all one and the same. Pricing needs to work with it. Marketing needs to work with it. Product development needs to work with it. So whether you like subscription or not, that's new kind of thinking, that's emerging, and especially with things like open banking data and consumer data rights, where you can, like we've said multiple times already, think with customer first and understanding of the data. It's a real call to arms for retailers to position themselves in a different way.
I think of loyalty again as customer centricity. So customer centricity is a driver of loyalty. You know, that's when you become loyal, when you're a customer-centric business and you do that end-to-end across everything that you do. But the only way you're going to drive, I think, the behavioral change to get all the different business units to work cohesively and in an orchestrated way, in the way that they need to deliver the experience customers are looking for, is if the KPIs change and what those different business units are being measured by changes. Because otherwise you're being measured by traditional operational metrics that relate to how many orders you shipped out in a day, or how many calls you answered in the contact center, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. And that doesn't necessarily drive the behavior or the experience that customers are looking for.
People won't anymore stay loyal just because you give them points. You've got to have loyalty at the very center of your business, or customer engagement at the very center of your business. All your other aspects need to be right. Your customer service, your product selection, your product quality, everything that you do has to be a good experience. Bolting a points-based loyalty scheme on top of a business that doesn't do those things well will not help you at all. You've got to have all the other aspects of customer engagement right as well.
Holland & Barrett's a good example. I've worked with them and seen their data, both in an e-commerce perspective, but also the physical store perspective. And you would consider them to be a fairly low price point retailer, but actually there are some people that spend huge amounts of money with them, you know, both online and in store. And part of it is, you know, what we found is that by analyzing their e-commerce data and also their store data, there was a commonality in the customer, and that if the customer shopped across both channels, then they spent more collectively, and it was something like 2 or 3 times more. So that customer that shops the omni-channel is a far more important customer to Holland & Barrett than just the physical store customer or just the online customer only. So that was an important finding that we found from that research. Physical stores themselves are becoming kind of emporiums for the brands as well. And that's why many retailers that, you know, I've been talking to, certainly in the fashion sector and other sectors, want to have flagship stores more than ever before, because they see the KPIs attached to actually the halo. You know, so the physical store is one thing and the EBITDA they make, but also what the physical store does for other channels, you know, so how it can be, you know, as you walk past at a showroom, for example, and so the consumer may not buy from the store, they may buy from the online aspect or the wholesale aspect. And that's why so many of these brands are taking flagship stores, because they want to leverage off that. So the marketing value of the store is very important. And that's why I'm seeing more and more property departments bring in the marketing function, or property being part of the marketing function, and becoming more a board level sort of decision-making process, as opposed to purely just, you know, seen as a second fiddle to other departments within the business.
The data alone would suggest that going into the pandemic, so this is the coral color, there's actually been an increase in loyalty. That's what the data says, but the reality is probably that owing to supply chain issues and actually availability, that we were forced to spend more of our wallet with only 1 or 2 particular retailers. Yeah. I think also if we look at coming out of the pandemic, so the navy blue, it also appears the data suggests there's been a decrease in loyalty. So now the world is opening up, consumers, they have many more options now, and they're not really being forced to spend with specific retailers.
Depending where you get your stats from, roughly 26% of sales are online across all retail categories. Now, obviously, that's much higher in some categories than others, but what that tells you is that as of today, there's something like 70 to 4% of online sales still taking place in bricks and mortar. But retailers have got a job to do to definitely deliver the type of experience that consumers are looking for. And when I interview, I did quite a lot of mystery shopping and talk to high street customers, and I say to them, what frustrates you about buying in a physical store? And the two things they always tell me is, one, there's never enough staff to serve you when you need it. So retailers have been cutting back on their resources in the store, which makes it harder for people to make a purchase decision. So that, in a way, becomes a cause and effect. Why would you go to that store in the first place if you invariably know that it's underserved, you're going to be underserved? And two, the propositions are very homogenous. So I think we had a lot of retailers that kind of felt and looked quite similar. And I think if we're going to create emotional connections with brands, we have to have a differentiated proposition. We have to differentiate a product. We have to be able to deliver a type of experience that consumers want. Retailers need to behave like small retailers. You know, what you get when you go into an independent retailer is you get a voyage of discovery. You don't know, from a product point of view, there's always something new. You don't know what you're going to find. The staff are brilliant. The service is great. They often know who you are. There's a degree of personalization. Somehow in big national retail chains, we've given all the power to the head office, and we've taken everything away from the local stores to the point where, even although they're in different parts of the country, they have no real input in determining what they sell, to whom they sell it, how they market, how they communicate. And yet these are the people that know their local areas better than anyone. So I think there's a bit of a change that needs to take place there, I think, to meet consumer demand and consumer needs.
The word retail will increasingly become obsolete as we move into what I call consumer commerce. The reason I call the future consumer commerce is increasingly businesses that sell products and services to the consumer do not have to have a legacy in the physical store environment. That doesn't mean stores will not be important, and in most economies, 60 to 70% of sales will still go through the traditional store environment, but the future is a hybrid model of different channels. Now, what COVID has done, it has accelerated a number of key trends, and it has accelerated these by 5 to 10 years, and therefore the necessity for leaders to really drive change through their businesses. The number one is business models and partnerships. And you could be really flippant and say, up until 10 years ago, retail had been the same for 2000 years. You sourced great product, you shipped it, and you sold it in a physical store. If you were good at that, you just opened more physical stores. And many leaders that really came to greatness in the 80s, 90s, and noughties, they had subscribed to that business blueprint. We know that that doesn't work anymore. The route to market has fragmented, and therefore you have to change the way you operate. Most business models of today's retailers are built around 90 to 95% physical sales, even if it's just 15 or 20%. The reality is, though, that most of today's business models don't work. The second key point is around cost and efficiency, and that is interrelated to the business model point. If you have a business model that is too expensive, then you have to fundamentally save. And we look at profitability in the sector. Globally, over the last 10 years, it has declined by 50%. So there is a race to the bottom. The third is all around purpose and reputation. If you don't stand for more than just profit, you don't have a place on the high street, on the virtual high street, or whatever you want to call it in the future. Fourth is the customer. And that really goes back to the heart of this debate. Retail for millennia was about great products and great locations. Well, guess what? You still need great products and great locations. but you also need to know who she or he is you're interacting with. The days of having great products and great locations and the anonymous herd will turn up are over. And they're over because there are businesses, consumer commerce players, that really do understand who their consumers are. They have that added advantage. And guess what? They're all opening shops.
From a data perspective, obviously there's a wealth of data that's available already. So retailers have their own data, their social media data, their survey data. But I really believe that as open banking continues to become widely adopted, we'll actually see a greater use of consumer spending data. This will mean more personalization because retailers have a better understanding of their customers. They're not using reported data anymore. They're using actual real behavioral data. And I think this will hopefully mean less of a focus on CAC, so customer acquisition costs, and more of a focus on lifetime value, so actually acquiring and retaining the most loyal and the highest value customers.
I think we're going into the fan zone when it comes into loyalty. What I've learned through the white paper is this new term, this VVIP, who clearly is head to toe brand loyal, has this emotional attachment. I think somebody quoted the fan mentality. It's like the guys that have Tottenham Hotspur tattooed on their neck.
It's not going to be so much about the rewards that you give. It's going to be about the value that customers can get from those rewards. So, and the rewards might not necessarily be points. They could be other things. They could be experiences. They could be cashback. They could be lots of different ways to reward the customer. And knowing what the customer likes and what they want from your brand, what they expect from your brand, will enable brands to target their offering in that way. And then it becomes extremely valuable to the customer. So a problem that some brands have had is things like Avios, where they give out lots of Avios points, but then there aren't any flights available, so people can't use them. So then they have to innovate and find different ways. And Avios have done that very successfully with giving you other ways to burn your points. And other brands are going to have to think about that, whether they're a points-based program or not. They're going to have to think about, well, what is actually valuable to the customer and how do I engage with the customer in that way? And the data will be vital to doing that.
Some of these brands have realized that, you know, to increasingly maintain relevance in a crowded wholesale world or a crowded online world, they actually need to be able to go back to the high street and create an emporium for the brand. And so the likes of Dyson are doing that. Even Monopoly have taken a physical space. You know, traditionally they've only ever sold that through, I guess, wholesale, you know, Monopoly, and those wholesalers are now taking physical spaces. So there's a Monopoly experience store, and that's to Tom's point about, you know, creating experiences and all the rest of it, which is 10,000 square foot on Tottenham Court Road. So it's a massive area that you can go around and play Monopoly with your friends in a virtual sort of life-sized area. But, you know, what they're doing is ultimately enabling you to experience the brand in the best possible light so that you buy more off that product and talk about it with your friends, share Instagram, social media. So it all really sits together quite well.
If I look at the future, I mean, we're going to go full circle. If I go back 100 years, customer centricity was at the forefront because we had limited choice. We went to our independent. That independent knew who we were. They knew which products we wanted. They had a little credit book behind their counter. And mass retailing, mass consumption to a degree has taken all of that away. But we are going to go back full circle and be customer. It will be purpose and reputation, then product. And that is how we're going to measure our success in the future. Loyalty is not just a marketing and an insight topic. It's a topic that sits with the CEO and the CFO, and it's the heart of the business.
advance of open banking and card linking and all these technologies that are now going to enable customers to share their data with different brands in a very seamless way. So no need for a Nectar card, an Avios credit card, no need for a club card or anything like that. It would just be taken from your transaction. And that will make it much more seamless for the customer, but it'll also generate a lot more data. So not only will Sainsbury's know every SKU that you buy in store, they'll also know your total spending category. And they'll be able to target people in a much more, and all brands will be able to target people in a much more effective way. So yeah, so I think the fintech and the new technologies that are coming out in that space will be vital for loyalty.